Well, first I have to say I'm a big fan of your work, so this is going to be really exciting. How this is going to work is we're going to show 3 different reels from Rodrigo's films, and we'll talk in between them. And we'll just have a conversation about your work. And I thought we would start by asking you, I know you grew up in Mexico City, and I wanted to ask what inspired you to study cinematography? Were you a fan of the movies, and how did you fall into this career?
Actually, it was more by doing movies than I guess a classic path is people that love movies and then decide to study filmmaking. In my case, it was more making shorts, movies in Super 8, and with my older brother Antonio, we discovered stop motion. And so we started doing little science fiction and horror movies with our little clay monsters and stuff. And it was just playing, really. It was just fun. And you know, as the years went by, we started progressing. We got into sound, we got into editing, and also the visual effects got more and more sophisticated. Rewinding the movie, or scratching for laser beams on the scratching the film, stuff like that. And so I just loved doing it. I wasn't even aware that you could be study filmmaking and actually do that for a living. It wasn't, nobody in my family was into it, or it didn't occur to me. So I always liked design or things of that sort. So that's what I thought I was maybe going to go into advertising or something like that, or something to do with graphic design. But then someone told me that there was such a thing as a film school. And so that's how I decided to try it. And first I went to a film school that actually was focused on Super 8, and then it actually closed. I just did, I think it was 2 semesters there. And so then it didn't finish. So I started working in a still photography studio. That's how I got into photography and into lighting, composition. And I was just schlepping all the bags around and printing the photos, and so that's where I really got into the visual side of it. So then I went into another film school in Mexico City, Centro de Capacitación Cinematográfica, and when I got into it, I was leaning towards cinematography, but I still wasn't totally sure. I wanted to direct, maybe. But then the first year of film school, you had to direct a short and to shoot others, and there's where I discovered that what I enjoyed most was shooting. And so I directed my little short, but I had more fun shooting the other shorts that I was as a cinematographer, and that's how I decided to do that.
Yeah, and soon after that you got right into shooting commercials. And your first feature break was which film was that? And how did that happen?
Yeah, I was 22 when I shot my first commercial as a DP. It was
That's really young.
very lucky, and one of those, literally by accident, because I was working as a production assistant in a commercial, and I cut myself. It's a long story, but anyway, long story short.
By injury.
By injury. The owner of the agency drove me home because I was bleeding in my hand, and I told him that I wanted to be a cinematographer, and I had taken still pictures of this other shoot. I was a PA, and so he asked the production company to hire me as a cinematographer for his next commercial. Low budget, small. It was actually a commercial for a telegraph company. Telegraph. I feel old. The National Telegraph Company. So that was my first commercial. I had never even shot 35mm film, just 16 Super 8.
Wow.
So I didn't even know where to roll the camera. Anyway, that was a big break, and so I started doing commercials from that moment, and I really didn't go through being a camera assistant and that sort of stuff. I did it once, paid. In film school I did it several times, but only as a job just once, and that was really terrifying. More than when I was hired as a cinematographer, actually.
Yeah.
And so my first feature, it's hard to say because I started doing these really, really low budget 16mm features. I don't know if to count those or not, but I did 4 of them. And you shot them in 2 weeks, no budget, and just horrible scripts, whatever, really, sort of action, sex, really cheap.
Independent film.
Yeah, well, beyond independent.
Yeah.
And the first film that I did that was actually for cinema in 35mm. It was called Un Instante para Morir, An Instant for Death. And it was also like a killer with the Zodiac, and I don't know, something like that. So yeah, that was my first movie.
That's great. You know, your career has been amazing. Over the course of several years, you've worked with several notable auteurs, Ang Lee, Iñárritu, Oliver Stone, Spike Lee, Pedro Almodovar. How did you fall into that group of people? How do you begin to distill like their vision as an auteur? And I mean, how did you make that leap? Let's start there, from the small indie films you were shooting to this international, you know, filmmaker world.
I have no idea how that happened. No idea. Well, you know, I was doing the movies I was doing in Mexico, and then Amores Perros happened. That was the last movie I did before I actually moved here to Los Angeles with my family. My wife and my daughter are here somewhere, and the father's there, and they're there. So we had no idea, you know, what was going to happen or anything, and so, you know, that wasn't in the union, so I had to, you know, get hours going, all that stuff. And at one point, my agent called me. I was about to do a small movie for Disney, and my agent called me and said, "Do you want to meet Oliver Stone?" And I said, "Well, maybe." Of course, you know. So we met, and I started. I went to Africa with him to shoot documentary footage of the refugee camps in Africa. He was preparing a movie that he didn't direct in the end. That was called Beyond Borders. It was done, but not by Oliver. So we prepped it. After that trip, he offered me to shoot the movie. So that was how that relationship started. We then did the documentaries, Comandante, etc. So that was Oliver. Spike Lee, Curtis Hanson, they both saw Amores Perros, and you know, they liked the style of the movie, and they wanted me, because of Amores Perros, to shoot their movies. But say Frida, for example, with Julie Taymor, when I first spoke with Julie, she hadn't seen Amores Perros yet. She'd seen my previous Mexican movies, which were a whole different style, very, very different. So in a way, I think that was good, because it's allowed me to, I think, not be typecast into a certain style, because when I started, it wasn't like only Amores Perros, you know, and yeah, Frida is very different, obviously, to say 8 Mile, you know, 25th Hour. Those were like the first movies I was starting to do here. So I guess I've had the opportunity to play with different styles.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, that's one thing we were just saying beforehand. Your work is so diverse that I don't look at a movie and say, oh, that's Rodrigo's work, because every movie that you approach differently, I would guess you'd prepare differently, and you want to fit the story. How does your creative collaboration begin with the director?
Well, one thing I enjoy about my work is that it's so different every time. Not only the script and all that, just the way different people work and approach the creative process. And I like to be very flexible and learn from that, and also grow and allow myself to really get into the mind of a director, and to see why that point of view is interesting, or why a director wants to approach a scene or a movie in a certain way. And I try to embrace it and understand it, and then bring my ideas into that, as opposed to you know, this is my style. This is the way I work. If you hire me, that's because you like this, and this is what I do, and there you go. You know, and so so I just, you know, I try to. Also, I think that just for myself creatively, I search for new challenges, and to, you know, be learning every project. You know, I think you never finish really film school, if you want to call it like that. You're always, you know, every time it's different, and so.
Well, great. I think now is probably a good time to actually start to look at your work. And what we're going to do is we're going to show, I believe, Reel 6 of Brokeback Mountain. And again, you were nominated for an Academy Award and several awards for this film. So we're going to roll this reel. I think it's about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about that.
Okay.
So, thanks.
That's good.